Hello, I'm Sarah Crompton and welcome to this week's edition of the WhatsOnStage Podcast. I'm on my own today and I'm up at Three Mills Studio on the last day of rehearsals for Jamie Lloyd's new production of Evita, which is about to open at the London Palladium. And I'm really pleased to welcome two special guests, the choreographer, Fabian Aloise, and the actor who is playing Che Guevara, Diego Andres Rodriguez. Pleased to welcome you both.
So grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
How are you all feeling? I've been watching a bit of video footage of the rehearsals of the dance, and it looks energetic. So how are you finding things, Diego? How has it been being put through your paces?
Oh, it's so exciting. I'm loving doing this work. I mean, it's incredible to get to do all of Fabian's exciting choreography in the show. And, luckily enough, I have a bit to sing. So as much as I'm excited to want to do all the dance, I know it's wise for me to kind of keep it calm because although I want to do a lot of stuff, I can't say the words if I do all of it, but it's been just so exciting and very energetic.
You do most of it.
I do a good amount. And
you do most of it.
And I'm almost called to want to do it. It's just, it's such exciting, fun choreography that everyone in the is just looks overjoyed to do, and it of course it's got to pay off of a lot of work, but it is the most exhilarating time, and it's just so thrilling.
And Fabian, that really occurs to me because watching your choreography, you do make everybody move. So the dancers dance, but also the actors dance as well. I mean,
100%. 100%.
How is it different working with actors who dance from dancers who dance?
I kind of approach it exactly the same for both. I think I try to follow the narrative no matter what I'm doing as much as I can. And if there is no narrative, I'll try to create one because I find the narrative is the most interesting part of the movement. And I think I discovered a while ago that I best serve the production when I deal with body language and physicality. And then if that lends itself to becoming more choreographic and less body language, then I lean into that. And then if it needs to be more movement or more body language, then I lean into that. But for the most part, actors, I would have to say, I'm going to be really controversial now. I would have to say dancers are actors.
Right.
And I like to work with those dancers that have that ability. And I think most of the best dancers are brilliant actors. And I think they don't get a lot of credit for that. But in the productions that I've been lucky enough to work on, I've been lucky enough to cast really good dancers who are brilliant actors as well. And they have that ability, they have that facility to tap into.
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally agree with that. I write about dance a lot. And obviously, so one of the things I watch most of all is people just dancing and telling a story. And you always know that the really good dancers are the really expressive ones. But you make them, this is an adaptation of the production that Jamie Lloyd did at Regent's Park. Open air to some extent, isn't it?
To some extent, yeah. I think we started with that initial idea because we were like, oh, we can revisit this. We didn't get a chance to do it at the Barbican because of the pandemic, but then we discovered very quickly that we wanted to start all over again, and so that's what we've done. And so essentially, while some of the things have stayed genetically the same, like the structure of the set, and the steps that we use, I think I could probably say that almost 90% of it is different now.
That's so interesting.
It's really had I would even go as far as saying it's not really an evolution of the show it was. It's a completely different show. And I think when you see the actors that we're using and these people come in with their own stories, their own backgrounds, their own DNA, it's impossible to try to fit them into something that was created back in 2019. So it was like, okay, let's wipe the slate clean and let's just start from scratch. And I think for the most part, that's what we ended up doing. And it's been so exciting.
I think it's awesome. I mean, the world's changed so much this past couple of years.
So
it's
much.
Also, it's so exciting to get to work with this company again. And even with the success of moving from the Sunset here, now it's like, okay, how then can this also be another follow up on that? And so it's just it's just so exciting and thrilling to get to work with you all again. And do this now because it feels like it has to be a different show. It's just a different world that we live in.
Yeah, so let's get you both into Jamie Lloyd world because I do feel that's.
I know I jumped the gun a bit there, but I did.
So Diego, you talk me through how you have been in. This is your West End debut.
Yes, ma'am.
Which must be quite exciting. But how did you started with Jamie in Sunset Boulevard on Broadway? So how did that come about?
We were just talking about this recently, but I had almost never been to New York. I'm from South Texas, and so this is a region. Texas is very big, and so I'm from the southernmost region in a town called McAllen, Texas, is where I come from, and it's right on the border of Mexico. And my first time going to New York was for a Broadway audition. It was my junior year of college, and I went to the University of Michigan, and I thought, you know what? There's this open call online to audition for a Broadway show. And I went into that show. It was very exciting. It was a fun audition process, but I ended up really not hearing anything back from that casting company until a whole year later. And it was March of my senior year at university in 2024. And I got an email saying, hey, there's going to be this incredible production coming from the West End of Sunset Boulevard. It's a revival by the Jamie Lloyd Company. And I had no idea that there was a musical version of the film Sunset Boulevard. I had no idea. I was like, oh, this seems cool. And I think it'd be wise if I'm going to go move to New York anyway. I might as well try to get into the audition early on, just so I start getting to meet people. If they thought so much of me to invite me back for an audition a year later through my school email, I thought it would be wise to go and show up. And so it was March. I went in for that first dance call. And it was my second time ever going to New York. And I went there. And it was so exciting and also kind of challenging and thrilling to see you in the room. The first person that I saw, it was Fabian, and it was Paris. I think it was y'all two.
Yeah, my associate Paris.
Yeah, so it was who I auditioned for them first, and I thought it was so fun and a little bit scary, but in the most exciting way to see a Latino choreographing the room and having the intensity of the people that I worked with growing up in South Texas. Like it was this, all of a sudden, I went to school in Michigan for 4 years where none of my professors looked like the adults that I grew up, looking up to and having to abide to as a student. And so I was back in that environment, and it was a professional environment. And I thought it was so thrilling to be like challenged and saying, hey, I know you can do better than that. Like it was more than just saying, okay, good job. It was like, no, you can be called to do something more because I know that you can. And it's just this really cool, it was a really fun audition, and it was exhilarating. And I did that first dance call, went on to the singing bit. Then we did tapes, because tapes is a big thing that everyone does now. And then I did a final callback I went in for that Joe cover for the show in Sunset. And that was
which you got.
Which I got, and it was the most exciting audition ever. I had the most fun in the world. I just, if they told me to jump, I asked how high. I wanted that job so bad. I was
literally
literally, yeah.
Can you do a dive roll? Yeah, and he just did it.
And I mean, I feel like I could. I mean, I'm not trained at all, but I was like, I'm just gonna do it. Like I want this job so bad. I mean, this seems like such a fun team. And they're having me run around the room, and I had no idea why I was running around and having to sing, and I had no idea what was going on, but I just had such a fun audition. It was so fun. I loved it. It was awesome, and it was like the most thrilling 30 minutes of my life.
So you've done all your debuts with Jamie Lloyd Productions. So that was your Broadway debut, and now your West End debut. I'll come back to this show, but Fabian, where do you first encounter Jamie? How do you start working in his?
I worked with Jamie initially at the 24-hour musical at the Old Vic, because I was a resident choreographer for Matilda, the musical in the West End, and they needed choreographers and movement directors, and I just said, I'm not doing anything on that particular day. I think it was a Sunday. And so I showed up in the canteen, and Jamie came down to the canteen, took a look and said, I need a choreographer with me. I raised my hand, and I spent 24 hours with him making this amazing piece of theater that we ended up showing at the end of the day that had Celia Imrie in it. And it was wonderful. Yeah. And I remember him saying to me at that time, I love the way you work with people. I love the way you treat people and work with actors. And do you do any movement direction? At the time, I was so tied into working with the children at Matilda, and anyone that's worked with children and knows Matilda knows that it's a 7-day, 24-hour-a-day job. Yeah. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I finally decided to leave the sort of resident associate choreographer world and dive into doing it by myself. So I reached out to him, and I sent him a video of something that I had done for a UK tour of Our House, the musical, I said, look, this is really bad footage from the back of the stalls, but this is something that I've been working on. And then he said to me, can you meet me at Paddington Station in 3 hours? Wow. And I was like, this is so James Bond, which is very Jamie Lloyd. Yeah. And then I met him at Paddington Station, and he said, do you know the show Evita? And I said, yeah, of course. I'm like one of Madonna's biggest fans. And he said, well, they're doing a revival of it at Regent's Park. And, I just haven't seen anything like what you've shown me. So I think if this is a tell of what you do, then I'd really love to collaborate with you. And that was our first kind of big foray into working together.
And I mean, just on that Regent's Park one, I mean, it was so amazing because it had the bleachers and it seemed such a radical way to do Evita, which was a show that I'd always seen in a really big set and, quite elaborate, really. And seeing it there and watching it, I watched it in the rain. It was on the press night. Do you remember that the rain came in just before?
And then it stopped by miracle.
And then it stopped by a miracle. But they were still...
That's the power of Jamie Lloyd, I remember.
Yes.
But I was always so worried about those dancers on those slippy steps. And then you went on, you've worked fairly regularly with him. But let's talk a little bit about Sunset, because Sunset was so extraordinary, because Sunset doesn't seem to be a dance show at all. Mm-hmm. And yet you put an enormous amount of movement into it. Do you see what you do as being movement direction more than choreography, or do you think those terms are sort of meaningless, really?
I think they're interchangeable. I think I don't think they're meaningless, because I think it's all very meaningful, but I think with regards to one or the other, I think they're the same. As I said before, the narrative is so important, and I think unless you're there just to make pretty pictures, and I'm not very good at making pretty pictures. I discovered that very early on. I need something to hold on to. I need some sort of bone to put the flesh onto. And that's the story. And I can do pretty pictures, but I need to almost be told, this is what I need you to do, and frame it like this. Otherwise, I'm just going to get lost in this void of, it could be anything. But the second there's a narrative, the second there's a story, then I go, we could tell this bit of the story like this, or this character becomes more important. And I mean, for instance, Sunset, there was this idea. I had worked with this amazing dancer on a version of Cabaret that I was lucky enough to choreograph at the Lido in Paris. And I was working with this dancer called Hannah Chamberlain. And she was so amazing. And I remember when we were auditioning for Sunset, I said, Jamie, you got to meet this girl. She's just incredible. She's breathtaking. And we brought her in. And initially, she was only going to be kind of like this sort of ghost-like haunting figure, young Norma / Salome. We didn't really know what we were going to do at the time. And but what it was a vessel for me to kind of pour in any sort of movement I wanted into this body. And then very, very quickly, we realized she's this integral cog of the show. And she ended up being in every part of the show. And then subsequently, when we took the show to Broadway, Equity came in and deemed her a principal, because they were like, this is a principal character now. Yeah. And which was probably one of the most proud moments of my career and I remember Hannah and I holding each other and hugging each other. We're like, look at what we did, because it's very rare for that to happen, that a principal is a dancer in an otherwise singer-actor musical. Yeah. But I remember when Jamie first asked me to do Sunset, we had talked about, potentially doing something like that in the past, but I was always like, oh yeah, okay, well, I'll do a bit of this and a bit of that. I don't know what you want me to do. It's just a bit of movement. And he was like, no, I want you to do like this. I want you to tell the story this way. And we wanted to tell the story of the car chase. And so we dove into how do we do that? And I remember being in the auditions for the camera operators, and I was handed a gimbal for the first time in my life. And someone handed me the gimbal, and it was facing me, and I saw myself in the screen, and I started to move the gimbal from side to side like a wheel of a car. And I just said, Jamie, look, this is the car chase. This is the car chase. I could build a whole number around this. And he was like, oh my God, this is the car chase, and...
Is a gimbal, what exactly is a gimbal?
The gimbal is like the frame that you hold onto that supports the camera in the center that films the what needs to be filmed. And so it was like this whole journey that we went on, and then, you know, collaborating with Nathan and Joe with all the videography and stuff. I became a nerd. I became obsessed. You know, you're a bit of a nerd with the theater.
So what was it like to be part of that? Because I would say that the two things about Sunset were that, exactly as you say, the dancers were very characterful. They weren't just dancers. They weren't just coming on to make movement. They were characters who were engaged. But then also the thing that everybody talks about, of course, is taking the characters out onto the street, and this whole business about suddenly being on the move. How was it to be part of that?
Oh my gosh, what a dream. I mean, for any actor, you know, everyone hopes that, you know, whenever they decide a career in you know, being an actor or in theater or something, that there is an opportunity to interact with film as a medium. And I think y'all created a show that just allowed for those mediums to come together. And I think one of the most perfect ways that theater's seen yet. And because it's all about a show that comments about film.
So as the cover for Joe, did you get to go out onto Broadway with the camera? So you did that because we saw Tom Francis do it here and sort of stop the traffic on the Strand. So what was that like, having people take photographs of you, put you into TikTok?
That was thrilling. I mean, I took notes from Tom. He said, hey, you know what? You just got to keep the horse blinds on. You know, I'm sure you have some crazy ADD or ADHD, Diego, so don't get too distracted with what's going on. You're going to forget the lyrics, but it's so exhilarating. It's genuinely a breath of fresh air getting to leave the theater and know that it's you and it's your team making sure that you're safe out on the street. It's Shayna McPherson, she's watching on the camera, and it's the entire ensemble. Everyone's out there with you, and we're all a part of this thing that's going to it changed theater history, and it's also going to make the entire house that's you're now, you know, a couple hundred feet away from scream when they find out it's shot live and you go back into the theater. I mean, it was absolutely exhilarating getting to do all that stuff. The car chase too, getting to come up with the camera for the first time. What a great way to set the scene of this is now what we're going to be interacting with, and it's got those credits, and it was completely unforgettable. I mean, there's days where I think about that whole time, you know, just in reminisce and
it was an amazing time. The whole New York experience was incredibly amazing, and I think one of the things that we got to do in New York that we didn't do here in London was incorporate the entire cast into the walk around outside. You know, Joe got to do it in London. We did use a couple of cast members backstage at the Savoy, but when we were at the St. James, we wanted to elevate it. So I spent many an hour in Schubert Alley with the company, just kind of like getting them to file in on time and, you know, look down the barrel of the camera. Right. So I think by the time you did Joe, you already knew both sides.
Right, I knew how to do it, but that was about 2 days full of tech. It's just getting all that. It
was literally stuff. 2 days of being out in the midst of like craziness.
Yeah, all the time.
Because it is crazy. It is crazy, and there's no telling what New Yorkers are going to be like from moment to moment.
What was the worst thing or best thing that happened with it when you were out on the street?
Oh my gosh. So one of the story that I tell almost anybody is, this is still, we're in previews, and Tom was, we had not really figured out the timing of understanding that other theaters would be, we knew, but we just went a little bit over in our intermission. And Hell's Kitchen, which is on the corner of Schubert Alley, they released about 1,000 something people into the streets because the show ended.
All at once.
While all of the entire company was out there, while Tom was out there. And so we're all going there as an ensemble, and all of a sudden we're lost in all these people, and it's just Tom and Shayna, and Tom's crawling through people, clawing, just being like, I got to get out of here and get back to the theater. We all were not in that shot, but oh my gosh, just... even the audience going back into the theater, they made it in time. Wow. Hearing the audience, they knew
it was legitimately thrilling. It was absolutely thrilling to watch and be in the auditorium watching this all happen. Obviously, we were all at panic stations go because we were like, oh my God, what's happening? There's so many people all of a sudden. But when Tom hit the stage and we knew everyone was absolutely okay and accounted for, it was like magic.
That was so magic. Cool. Amazing. I mean, that never happened again, but oh my gosh, that was magical. That was just
sure it never happened.
I know. Yeah. We made sure we got the schedules right after that. But so luckily for me, I mean, nothing crazy ever happened when I was on the street. I mean, but it was definitely fun.
Of course, what everybody is asking with Evita, especially since London Palladium has a very convenient balcony, is whether you're likely to do anything that comes outside in Evita.
Listen, the only thing I can say is that working with Jamie, and there's always going to be something that is not quite what you expect it to be. Right. But we can't say anything more than that.
Yeah, we can't.
But everyone's going to want to buy a ticket.
You're going to need a ticket. I mean, this is such an exciting... I mean, what a way to follow up one iconic show that they created. I think,
Yeah.
They made Sunset Boulevard. When I went to university, I never heard Sunset Boulevard as a musical. 4 years I was there. And now everyone at school talks about Sunset Boulevard. And I think that's going to be the same for this Evita production. You all as a team are so good at allowing there to be productions for a new generation and for it to stick and resonate with people. And I think this is definitely something that people are going to remember.
Yeah, I think Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice with Evita must be so pleased that it's going to be done again and done in a different way.
Right.
How did you get the part? How did you know that you were coming in to do Che in London?
I wonder how much of the story I should tell, but I ended up, I was doing, I know, right? Yeah. So I was Artie. I played Artie Green. So with the best friend to Joe Gillis in the show. And so I did that on Broadway and I covered for Joe. And so by the time that I ended up auditioning for Che in the show, when they asked me to audition, I got a call from my agent that says, hey, Jamie wants you to come in a week and there's Rachel Zegler's on this thing. You got to like lock in and do this stuff. And so I prepped for that audition, of course, but it was, times behold, it was hard to really get my horse blinds on to, really focus on this audition. So we ended up having to do like 2 rounds so I could really get the material together to audition for Andrew Lloyd Webber, really.
Oh, so Andrew did the auditions?
Now they had to send tapes.
Sent tapes.
But you smashed it.
It was so fun. I mean, I had such a great time. It was thrilling. They at that point, they had enough trust in me that I've done about 20 of the shows as Joe at that point. So it was definitely saying, okay, this kid's a young kid, but I definitely felt a lot of confidence from them in myself to say, hey, you know what? We know that you can do this. So can you actually do it? Can you show up and can you audition for this thing? And so it instilled a fire in me that was definitely made it an exciting audition process. And it allowed me to sit into material that I'd always known, or I'd known for a while. When first time I ever heard High Flying Adored, my roommate in college pulled out the music from his binder and said, hey, I think this would be a good song for you. And that was the first time I ever heard it. And so I got to sing it for a Broadway audition or for a West End audition, but in a there at Ripley Greer Studios. And
It's amazing.
Yeah, but it was amazing. I wasn't in there with the room with you. You're on Zoom.
No, I was on Zoom. I was already back here and working with doing dance calls with Much Ado. So I had to come fly back early, but I was on Zoom and I watched you.
Let's do a tiny bit on Much Ado as well before, because I then want to talk about your careers generally. But Much Ado had so much dancing in for a Shakespeare show, and actually for a non-Shakespeare show, had quite a lot of dancing. I mean, what was that like? Because I interviewed Tom Hiddleston and Hayley before, and they before it opened. And obviously he's done so much dancing and was so excited about it all. How was it?
I mean, working with them two in particular, they were the best, honestly. If I said, try this, they would absolutely do it. Hayley I saw an interview with her. I don't remember who was interviewing her, but she said that and I did do this on the first day of rehearsals. I put them all around in a circle and I said, okay, it's a bit of a trust exercise. It's 3:00 in the morning. You're drunk. What's your best move at a wedding? Come on, show it. And then you have to come in the middle of the circle and do it. And we all have to copy it. And bear in mind, I've not done a lot of movement direction. So I was really allowing Jamie to guide me through what he wanted. And so I was just doing all these games, and then, as she says in the interview, and then he used it against me because I was like, oh, I like that step, I'm taking that. Oh, I like that step, I'm taking that. And then pretty soon that became the choreography of the show. So wow. I think I will always go down in theatrical history. It's the guy that put the sprinkler on stage at Theatre Royal Drury Lane. But hey, they did it great.
Exactly.
They did it great.
But that's one of the things that interests me about your choreography, that you quite often seem to choreograph things that are so fast and so perilous, that you're sitting in the audience and you're thinking, this is amazing. This is how people do dance at a wedding, if they're quite good dancers. Yeah. But you're worried about their feet all the time. I'm always bothered that they're about to go over on their feet.
I mean, safety is always like first and foremost paramount, isn't it? For me, like I'm literally like, you can't do this, you can't do that. We have like so many safety checks before we do anything. I think it should be thrilling, and I think the audience should want to be able to do it, even there's got to be a part of them that ignites and wants to feel that they could do it if they were able to jump up onto the stage. So I think I always say, I want you to have the technique that you need to do this, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to watch technique. I just want to know that you have it so that you're safe and we can trust what you're doing. But I think I'm going to sound so controversial, but I just think technique can be so boring to watch. So I want you, I liken it to, great, you've got the words memorized. Wow. But it's the way you say the words. And then now that I've had the opportunity to be in the same room as someone like Hayley Atwell should be Dame Hayley Atwell.
Yeah.
I mean, she is this generation's Judi Dench. You know, the way Shakespeare sits in her mouth. I never grew up with Shakespeare. You know, it's not really something that my family was into. You know, they were immigrants. I knew the stories, but I never really knew the language. And it was listening to her and Tom and all the other people that we got to work with, but primarily her. I was like, this is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like, I understand every single word that you're saying on an emotional level, not just on an audible level. And it was just, and so I became obsessed with, I've got to be really good. Now I've got to give them some really good stuff because I could ruin this. And I don't want to be the one that ruined this. So we just made it a massive party. And then obviously Tom went on Graham Norton and said to everybody in the UK that we were going to be doing loads of dancing, and then came back into the studio the next day and I was like, Tom, what have you done? I was like, now I've got to put loads of dancing in it.
But it was loads of dancing. I mean, I totally agree about Hayley. I think she's an amazing actor. And but it's like Pina Bausch, isn't it? I mean, it's that idea that everybody, if you watch a Pina Bausch show, you think you can do it, but actually it comes from very deep technique that's quite hidden.
And that's what's clever.
Yeah. And it is so brilliant, and I do love that. I want Diego. You have to forgive me a bit because I am now going to quiz him a bit about his career.
I'm loving hearing all of this. I'm having the best time, I swear.
Because I know that you started off in Australian ballet training. Having moved there from Canada on a scholarship. So I know that about you. But then you couldn't be a ballet dancer. Tell that story. Why didn't you manage to become a ballet dancer?
Well, I was one of my ballet teachers, Noelle Shader, and she was ballet mistress for the Australian Ballet Company. And she was one of our senior teachers at the Victorian College of the Arts Secondary School. And she had worked a long time with Balanchine in New York. She was a typical New Yorker. She was now living in Australia. And she could see the passion that I had for becoming a ballet dancer. And she pulled me aside and, you know, we walked down this little alleyway and she was like, do you want a cigarette? And I was like, oh, okay. This is what's happening. So I took the cigarette and she lit it and she went, this isn't going to happen for you. And I remember being devastated. It's just devastating to hear those words because obviously what she was saying to me was, I'm never going to hire you as ballet mistress for this company that you are desperate to become part of. And that's all I ever wanted. You know, I never really thought about musical theatre. It's in the ballet culture or the contemporary world, especially in Australia, that's something that you go, oh, is that something that you do if you don't make it? You know, like it was a very different time and it was a very different mentality. And she said, you're too small to come into the corps de ballet, and you're just not good enough to come in as a soloist. And you may become better, but I don't want to see you becoming a professional student. And I will always remember that phrase. I don't want to see you become a professional student. And I was like, so what do I do? And she said, I have a friend of mine from New York. His name's Kevin Backstrom. And he was one of the original West Side Story dancers, and he's going to be resetting West Side Story here in Australia. And she said, I want you to audition for it because the technique that you have exceeds what will come into the room. And I had no idea what she meant at the time. I just had to put my trust in that she was trying to open a door that I didn't even know existed. And then I went in, I got the job. I realized how ballet was so embedded in Jerome Robbins' work that all of a sudden I was like, oh, I could do this. I could be one of these dancers. Subsequently, then I started to, you know, work in Europe and in Germany and then brought to New York. And then I started to realize, oh, there are other heights that you can achieve a ballet, you know, career in. But by that point, I had gotten this bug. I had been bitten by the musical theatre bug. Right. And I was like, but there's this whole world now that I've fallen in love with.
Yeah.
yeah, that was that.
And I'm going to pick up that. But and how did you get into musical theatre? Was it always musical theatre that you wanted to do? Was this your direction from the start?
No, actually, not at all. My dad's one of 10 kids, and a lot of them do the arts. And so I grew up with a family that was always in the arts. And how that manifested for me for a long time is I played cello. So I was a cello student for 7 years. I did cello, and both of my sisters were in choir in high school. And when I first went into high school, they held musical auditions, which mainly were for the choir and drama students. And it was for In the Heights. And I grew up knowing In the Heights because my dad and my mom saw it in New York when it first came out. And my dad brought the album back home and he said, hey, you get up. You have to listen to this. I was like 8 years old. You got to listen to this musical. They have a musical on Broadway that has Latinos and it has rap. You know, like that was like the first thing he said. And I remember that line ever since I was young. And so I was not really exposed to musical theater until I auditioned for that show. I ended up not doing it. I was, in a lot of other stuff, I ended up not doing it. But it wasn't until I was a junior in high school, really, I ended up getting brought back into theater again. My sisters were doing it. I always get tied in with doing stuff with my sisters. And then, and then I realized my mom was like, wow, we never heard you sing or dance or do anything. We never seen you do that. Like, this is so exciting. And I found a lot of love for getting to perform for my community. And that was the first time I did sports. I did all this stuff in high school, but nothing brought my family, my dad's, all his siblings to come together besides putting on a show. And so that was really exciting. And so I think for that community aspect and also for people telling me, hey, you're pretty good at this. Like, you should really pursue it, because I had no technique at all. I had not done any choir, choral training. I had not done any dance. I was athletic because I swam in high school, and I knew music because I played cello. And so it wasn't until I was a senior in high school, really my last year of high school, that I said, you know what, I really got to get things figured out together. So I was telling Fabian earlier, I took ballet class with old women. Not to say old women, but I did take ballet class with older women. And that was the first dance class I ever took. I was the only young man in a class designed for older women. So that was the first classes that I ever took. And then I ended up really learning and having a lot of my training at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
And what kind of dance techniques did you do there? Did you do...
All across the board. Yeah, right. we had a lot of ballet. I mean, I also went to university during COVID. So my first year was all on the computer, but we did ballet, we did tap, we did some hip hop, we did partnering. But I ended up catering a lot of my education there to more of an actor's write. I also did a lot of writing in college too. So, okay. I ended up doing just a lot of the beginning bit of dance. So I never really felt like a dancer, but working with Fabian, I feel like I can dance. I feel like I can move. It's got this athletic movement that's narrative based. And it was just so thrilling to get to do your work there on Broadway, because I felt like, man, there's so much of this movement that is so motivated, and it's based in, there's nothing else on stage but us as an ensemble. And we all know what we want to do, and we need to be the environment and what we want to create for this show. And so that was just so thrilling for me, for someone that, I have so many friends that have the technique to where I feel like they can say they're a dancer. Yeah. But I never want to call myself a dancer, because I just know I lack the years in that training, but a lot of your stuff makes me feel like I can dance. And that is such a beautiful thing to have, Chili.
And I'm doing a lot of compression here, but what fascinates me about your career is that you've got sort of very specific influences, but you've always really worked with dance royalty. So you work with, you were associate to Arlene Phillips on We Will Rock You, which is obviously incredibly sort of physical movement. Then Peter Darling on Matilda, who is much more, I would say, about character through movement.
Very cerebral work with Peter,
Yeah, and then, you also worked with Anne Reinking, who worked with Fosse, and you worked on Fosse with her, which is just sort of an amazing legacy of dance, especially from Broadway, in Broadway terms, to have worked with somebody who worked so closely with Bob Fosse. What was that like? And what point do you encounter her?
I was hired to do Hunchback of Notre Dame world premiere in Berlin, and I wasn't happy as an ensemble member. And so
you're still dancing?
I was still dancing. And I left the show because we had a probation period. And I was like, I no longer want to do this. Thank you very much. And I went down the street, and there were auditions for Chicago, for the original German company. And I went in, auditioned, and I got the job. And I met Annie. And then about a year and a half after that, I was able to, she asked me, like, do you want to do this Fosse thing? And I got a chance to work a little bit with Gwen Verdon before she passed away. Wow. And then during my first year of Fosse, Annie had choreographed a solo on me for the Spirit of Bob Fosse, and she had extended it. And she said, I want you to stay the following year. What can we offer you? Because, I was kind of second bowler hat from the left at the time, apart from that one solo. And I said, I want to work with you. I want to do this with you. And so then she hired me as associate choreographer for the US and international tours. And so I was based at the time in Germany because I was still living there. But then she introduced me to New York. And I was being flown in and out of Manhattan and London. That was the first time I really came over here. And I started putting people like Bonnie Langford into the show, and Claire Sweeney and Ruthie Henshaw. Then in New York, I was working with Ben Vereen and BB, and like there was all this sort of like, and I got to meet, work with Cheetah a little bit, and I was just like so young and so kind of in awe of everyone around me, and wrapped in this legacy of this man that I never met, obviously, right. But was in every fiber of every step that we were doing. And it was all through Annie. Yeah. And then she became probably the biggest champion of choreography for me, because I remember her saying to me, she was the first person that said, "You're a choreographer." Mm-hmm. And I remember getting so riled by that, because at the time I was like, I'm not, I just want to be on the stage with you. I want to be a dancer. I wear my bowler hat on a jaunty angle, and I was like, and I was just so wanted to be the best for her. And I didn't realize what she meant. She never called herself a choreographer, funnily enough. She always said, I put dance together, but, it's all based on what Bob did.
She did the original choreography for Chicago.
For the revival, yeah. And she always said, it's not my choreography. I've just restaged it and it's all Bob's choreography. But the reality is, it's like working so closely with her. She was an amazing choreographer. So weird still saying that, but she was an amazing choreographer. She was this amazing person that inspired like so many of us. Yeah, and it's something really cool. And I remember when Sunset opened in New York, I was approached by Noah Fosse at the stage door, and he was like, "Can I take you for coffee?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I knew who he was, but I had never met him before. And so.
Son.
This is Bob and Gwen's grandson. So this is Nicole Fosse's son. And we went for coffee, and he was like, "I really want you to be part of the Verdon Fosse legacy." Wow. And so now I am.
No.
Yeah. And yeah. And so, and I was like, it was like this full circle moment. I'm getting emotional because I was like, it was so awesome. Full circle moment being back in New York and kind of like, embraced back into this sort of like Fosse family. Yeah. But yeah, it was a lot for me to learn at such a young age of basically becoming, it's interesting. I think everyone that I was associate to, I preserved choreography for Annie. I helped create choreography for Arlene and obviously, and launch it in other cities. And for Peter, I kind of was able to kind of work for the first time in my own mind, and so every choreographer taught me something different, and sometimes I think I'm, it's coming from me, but it's actually coming from years of like infusing it with, okay, so I'm going to preserve what I know, I'm going to pull from that, but I don't want it to just be stuck in my body, so I'm going to ask them to do it first, because that's what Peter does, and it's this like amalgamation of techniques.
So when you can talk about this as well, but when you ask them to do it, they do it first. That means that you're actually letting the dancers find it rather than going,
I box them in. I box them in. So I'll be like, this is the idea. This is the story. This is what we're going to do. This is the realms that we're working in. So if you work outside of this, it's no longer the show or what we're trying to create. And I may come up with one or two phrases that it kind of looks like this, or this is the language, this is the syllabus. And I let their body speak in that language, or I let them try to create the syllabus. And even in New York, we had this amazing template from London, but then I was working with all these incredible new triple threats on Broadway, and we knew what the show was as well. So we were going and auditioning specifically for, these are the prerequisites for these characters. And wouldn't it be great if this character could actually do this as well? Yeah. Because that would be like a 2-for-1. Right. So those are the people that we hired on Broadway. And then I remember my associate Paris and I coming into studios. I just you remember it, where I was like, guys, we're going to have to make this better for you because you are like sensational. So Paris and I would go back to the apartments and spend the evening kind of rejigging an entire number because we were like, we have to make you excel at what you can excel at. And so it was like a heightened version of what we did in London.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And did you find that you felt that you were being called on?
Oh, absolutely.
Sucked dry of ideas.
I mean, back to that conversation, I think it was movement that I felt excited to do because it felt grounded and athletic, and I for myself brought that, but it's for me. But seeing this company, I mean, it was so exciting to enter my first professional opportunity with an ensemble that was as talented as that, and like we picked up all the choreography, which was in the show within a week, maybe or maybe two or something. But it gave us room. We had a schedule that was now allotted for time to see. Okay, we all know it, but let's try to see what more we can add to it. And so it was definitely fun to really start experimenting with what more we could bring to the show. And it was such a great backbone to build a show on, because knowing that all of us knew entering this room that this show had done so well at the Olivier's, and it's now gotten nominated for 7 Tony Awards there in the States. And so it speaks, leagues for what this team has done. But it
Hopefully might have won a few by the time this podcast comes out, I think.
No, crossing my fingers. I love y'all. Congratulations.
So I mean, I could go on forever and I could talk about Fosse forever as well, bringing it to a close because we have been talking for a bit. But what do you hope people will take from it?
I think time and time again, I've had 2 jobs with y'all, but I think definitely, just in my experiences working with the Jamie Lloyd Company, I think it gives audiences a new way to imagine and see theater that keeps it so fresh and so exhilarating to watch as an audience member. And I think already working, we just ended our last day of rehearsals, and we have such a great form and such a great basis to put the show into tech now that I think I'm just so excited that people have now the opportunity to, again, see Evita in a way that, for me, I didn't know the show too much before getting this job. And so I hope, above all else, that audiences see this and can't help but remember one of the most incredible experiences that they had at the theater with this show. And so when they think of a show that comes to mind, it's like, man, the excitement, how new and how fresh this 50-year-old musical is, made me so, excited and overjoyed with how incredible a theatrical experience could be. And I think that's what this ensemble brings to the table. It is so fun. It's a heartbreak to be asked to leave what we did in New York and to leave that company in Sunset before the whole Tony's campaign and everything. That was something that I was like so heartbroken to do, but I can say full-heartedly that I am so thrilled and so proud and so grateful to be involved in this production, because it's definitely going to be such a special experience, and I'm so happy to be here.
And that raises an interesting point, Fabian, because it's also about the tech. Because I've talked to you about choreography as if you're doing it, in a room, and you haven't got microphones and screens and sets and confetti and all the rest of it. I mean, how do you work with all that to get what you want?
I think it would be really boring at this point if it wasn't all the bells and whistles. I mean, everything. I used to think, okay, this is a compromise. And now I've realized that it's not a compromise. It's an added element that we get to incorporate into the choreography, and it makes it even more special sometimes. And I think sometimes you can find something so nuanced that comes out of tech that you never thought was going to be possible, because there's a problem, because there's an issue, and then something else is born, and you're like, wow, that's so much better than I could have expected it to be. And I like to consider what we do, because we're all so lucky to work in theater, and we get paid to work and play around. And I just think I liken it to casting spells, and magic, because it is, you sit there and you kind of go, all right, now I'm going to cast this spell and I'm going to do something magical. And then the audience is going to feel it. And I think that's what really good theater does. I had this argument once with someone that said, you're not changing lives. You're not. And I'm like, but you are, you can. Yeah. And that's the thing. You can. My life was changed, and loads of people's lives can be changed just from that one single moment. And just what you just tapped into, I really hope that people come to watch this and think that's an amazing theatrical experience. I'm so lucky to have been in that audience and see that, you know, and especially for something that isn't running very long. It's not like it's running for 2 or 3 years. It's running for 12 weeks. And you just kind of go, you're going to be one of those lucky audience members that sees this moment in time, this moment in history with this incredible cast that are just fire. I mean, they are probably the strongest company I think I've ever worked with. And that's saying a lot because I work with some really good people, but these guys, they just leave nothing on the floor. They wipe it. Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, I will really look forward to being one of those audience members. I'll be there waiting to see what you do. So thank you so much for coming on the What's on Stage podcast and for talking to us.
What a pleasure to have us.
About Evita and everything else.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the What's on Stage podcast. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, rate, and all-round rave about the podcast wherever you can. We'll be back with regular episodes every Friday and a smattering of bonus episodes in between.